Hi, everybody. Today, what we're going to speak about is a very important subject that's going to have some far reaching implications for how we cope with various mental states. We're going to begin with a certain metaphor. The metaphor we're going to begin with is that of a samurai warrior. In ancient times, samurai used to fight with two weapons. These two weapons were a longer sword and a short sword. And so when an enemy would come, the samurai would draw the long sword to, meet the attack, and draw the short sword to kind of block, anyone coming up from the rear. And so they would, in this way, defend themselves in the middle of a battle. And today we're going to speak about two ways that we end up trying to deal with our mental states, and how often we end up using the short sword, so to speak, where we should be using the long sword to defend ourselves. And so we can extend this metaphor to an understanding of how we think and what we do. How we think can be likened to the long sword, this powerful weapon that can defend us against the mental states that bring us a lack of peace. The short sword can be linked to our will, and that ability to make an active choice and decision and take an action against our inclinations. A lot of our failure, I believe, is because without changing our thinking, we try to change our behavior, and this is something that leads to a lot of problems, because as I'm sure you see in your experience, there are many times when maybe there's something you want to overcome. Perhaps there is an anxious or obsessive mental pattern that you experience, and nothing seems to dislodge it, and you try to act against it or do different things in your life, and it's still there. Or you try to forgive somebody, and no matter how many times you seem to try to, with your will, pray for that person or whatever it is, you end up in that experience. You end up having all these kind of feelings, maybe come up again. So how are we going to deal with this problem? And the way that we usually deal with this problem is, again, by that short sword, by our will. We try to say, I'm going to if I'm afraid of interacting with people, I'm just going to go out and talk to people. If I am, if I can't forgive this person, I'm just going to keep praying for them. But my mind keeps going back to the issue. It goes back to the last time I saw them. It goes back to, the argument we have, whatever it is. So how do we overcome the way that our mind keeps going back again and again to the things that we are obsessed with, the things that we're anxious about, the things that we can't forgive? How do we make the mind stop going back into this loop? And the problem, again, is that we keep using our will only. We don't change the way we think. And the real problem is that we don't know how to change the way we think. Because a lot of times we try to change the way we think by, again, like this very willful method, this very this oppositional method. And there is a story, an Eastern story about, a king who, he goes to his butcher. And he goes to the butcher and he marvels at the butcher. And the butcher says, and he shows that the king, the king sees the butcher's knives. And he says, how is it that you never need to sharpen your knives? And the butcher replies, he says, that's because whenever I cut meat, I only aim where there is no meat. He says, I aim in between the joints, in between the bones, so that when I'm never cutting anything that is, solid, and so I never need to sharpen my knives. Now, this is obviously a metaphorical story. You probably always need to sharpen knives, but the thing is that it gives us a principle by which we can really understand what to do in these situations. We don't oppose things directly. The problem is we usually fight things head on rather than fighting them in an indirect manner. And I'm going to give you a principle now that's going to help you overcome various issues. So for example, let's say you are dealing with a scruple. In the spiritual life, sometimes there's a scruple. Okay, did I commit this sin or did I not commit this sin? Did I fully consent to this sin? Did I do that? Your brain can't come to certainty. It's going back and forth. What do? Notice the uncertainty. The more you notice the uncertainty, and if you know the principle, when in doubt, it doesn't count. Like if you killed someone, it's like, and there may be many things we could talk about with scrupulosity. There's other videos that go into more depth, but the main thing here is the noticing. You don't have a debate with yourself. You don't try to think differently. You simply notice the ways that you're uncertain about whether there's a sin, and by noticing the fact that you are uncertain, that is also in itself the production of safety. So by noticing the uncertainty, by you're basically noticing how you're safe. So let's say there's a situation you're afraid you're going to be tempted. Try to notice how you're safe. Try to notice how you're not in danger. Notice the ways in which you're not experiencing tension. So the thing is, it's this key word, and this key command is to notice. The key technique is noticing. And by noticing, you are enabled to see through, just like that butcher cuts through, the places where there is nothing. You're noticing things. You're not fighting with things that are solid. You're not having this oppositional encounter with your own mind. This is also really important for the practice of forgiveness. In the practice of forgiveness, a lot of times we try to just kind of white knuckle our forgiveness. We try to say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pray for this person. I'm going to offer masses for this person. I'm going to do all these things for this person. But no matter what happens is that if we don't understand how the mind works, we're going to be doing things the hard way. Thomas Jefferson once talked about, he gave this metaphor. He said, basically, there are two ways of picking up a jug, by the hard handle or the easy handle. It's kind of, and we want to pick things up by the easy handle. And in this regard, what we want to do is we want to pick up forgiveness by the easy handle, which is first the handle of perception rather than the handle of action, because that's how we began this video. The problem we're having is that we're trying to white knuckle it. We're trying to say, I make this will, I forgive the person. That's good if you can do that. If you can do that, that's good. But the thing is, it's a lot easier if we have the intellect come first. And this is in harmony with Christ does say, there's a way in which Christ does say, forgive them for they know not what they do. That's a very important thing, that if we have this impulse, forgive them for they know not what they do, it is this perceptual element to the practice. And so that's a very important thing, because if we don't have that perceptual element, what happens is that our forgiveness is bound up with a way in which there is this need to go against what we are thinking. And if we're doing that, there's not going to be a coherence to our being. There's going to be a rebellion inside of us. There's going to be this way in which we can't really get our whole self on board. And so this becomes very problematic. So here's how this looks. The key to this is to start with this principle that pity is the resolution of resentment. And if we understand this, the more we see things that are pitiable, so to speak, the less we will naturally reach out to strike the opponent. The desire to strike out at an enemy is based on seeing their actions as willful and dangerous to us. So it's, on one hand, it's like, okay, it's going to hurt us. They know what they're doing. They're willfully destroying my life. The more we see things like that, the less we're going to be able to really bring about a sense of peace within ourselves. But the more that we're able to see somebody as injured, the more we're able to see someone as ignorant or not knowing what's going on, the more we're able to see someone as doing something not on purpose, then the more free we're going to become. And so the thing is that if we see these factors, This becomes very similar to what Christ says on the cross when he says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." By being able to see this kind of a perception, by being able to have this type of perception, we start to become free from from these issues. And so that is something that we can take advantage of in the process of forgiveness. So how will this look if we were to put this into practice? What does this look like? Well, it's very simple. Start to notice the things that the other person is suffering from. Start to notice the things that made the other person do this thing to you, this thing that you're trying to forgive. Start to notice the struggles they're having. Start to notice maybe the things they don't know. Start to notice the way that their actions actually harm themselves. Start to notice the ways that, all the different elements of how they are a person who is a victim of themselves. And the more that you see that, the more that your hand will extend naturally in compassion and healing, rather than in opposition. So the thing is, it's that thing of this natural thing. We want to, again, pick up forgiveness by the easy handle rather than the hard handle. We don't want to say, okay, I want to just white knuckle the forgiveness and say, I'm going to use my will. Because the problem is that that's not going to work. It's not going to work. You're not going to have peace. Granted, you may have to act on the forgiveness to you have to act on those perceptions of that the person is injured, that the person is a victim of themselves, as well as you might be in some ways a victim of them, or maybe very obvious ways a victim of them, depending on the circumstance, So it's this thing, though. You have to see the other person's suffering. The more you see that suffering, the more your will easily move toward forgiveness. So it's all about noticing. It's all about noticing. It's all about those type of things. And because what the problem is that we're trying to do an action. What's holding us back is that we're trying to do an action that is not in harmony with our perception of that person. We're trying to be merciful by praying for an aggressor. But the thing is, we're going to, of course, have to pray for our enemies, but we need to, in a way, see our enemies as also in need of our prayers. That they are, as Mother Teresa may say, the poorest of the poor. We want to see the suffering of anyone who may have wronged us willingly or unwillingly in our lives. And the more we see that suffering, the more we naturally move toward forgiveness. I hope that's very clear. It's about noticing, because it's these two methods: the disharmonious method of where we're using our will, independent of our intellect, independent of our thinking, and the harmonious method, where we are using our intellect and will together. We're not making the system work the wrong way. So I hope this is helpful to you in your journey of getting free from various mental states. And it's all about noticing. By noticing, whether it's by noticing how we are safe, in the face of an anxiety, or how we are uncertain and therefore off the hook in the face of a scruple, or noticing how our enemy or a person who may have done us wrong, or in some way, real or imagined, we are freed from resentment. This noticing breaks through what our will, and it paves the way for our will. It makes straight the way of the Lord, so to speak. So I hope that this is helpful to you in understanding this process and finding freedom. And, this is very important, I think. So I hope this video is helpful. And again, it's that shift. We don't want to, like I was saying before, we don't want to be using that short sword of our will to be dealing with these issues. We want to use that long and strong sword of our intellect first, because we don't want to just be kind of using that thing, using the system the wrong way. We want to use it the right way so that we get the results and the freedom that we are seeking in Christ.